You know, sometimes you gotta look outside the box to find the gems, and I'm not even sure I was anywhere near the box when I found this one. But it's a similar story to what happened with the movie Cam I just reviewed. I saw the poster for this, and it caught my eye immediately. It was just beautiful looking, and I'm pretty sure the movie didn't even have a description at that point. So I looked up the trailer, and like 20 seconds into it or something, I'd seen enough. In a good way. Something happens that made me go, okay, this I wanna see. And that something is pretty unique. I've seen similar things done in anime, but never in a live action movie, I don't think. And I'm trying to figure out how much to say about it. Revealing what it is shouldn't really ruin anything, but it's just a lot more fun if it comes as a surprise. So let's put it this way. It's about two people and their lives become entangled in a pretty interesting way. And what this is a Chinese romantic comedy, sci-fi fantasy movie, which is a strange combination. And what's even weirder is that it's actually a really good movie, and it's surprisingly funny. And comedy can be a pretty tricky thing to do when you have to deal with subtitles. And some of it is a little bit over the top for my taste, a bit too heavy-handed. But a lot of it works. But the thing that really surprised me was how well all the other stuff works. The romance, the rest of the plot, it just works. Now I do have a few complaints, but in the grand scheme of things, they're all pretty minor. And they're basically all technical issues. I mean, you can tell this is not a Western production. It actually has a lot of those elements that I would associate with Chinese movies in general. Stuff like kinda weird, quirky quick cuts and edits, some strange effects here and there for no particular reason, and some of those techniques and effects do come across as a bit amateurish. And the ADR is not that great either, meaning they recorded a lot of the dialogue in a sound booth and dubbed it over in post-production, which movies do all the time. But in this you can kinda tell they did that, which isn't good. It creates a bit of a disconnect. And there were some pacing issues too, in the middle of the movie, but I'm not really sure what the issue actually was, because most of the scenes did feel necessary. They didn't feel like filler, and those are really my only real complaints, and none of that really ruined the movie or anything. And overall, this movie actually feels remarkably Western. There's even some pretty obvious references to some major movies, so it's not trying to hide its influences either. It's not being sneaky about it, and I appreciate that. Now, while watching the movie, some of the plot stuff did seem a bit unnecessary. I mean, I was invested in the main story, about the two main characters, right? And it felt almost like a fantasy movie. But then they brought in some sci-fi elements too, and a villain. And at that point I was like, why? It just isn't necessary. Well, turns out I was completely wrong, because this thing is actually extremely well plotted. When you actually get to the end, you realize just how tight the story really is. And considering the nature of a movie like this, I honestly don't think you could make it much tighter. Every single storyline and subplot weaves together and makes sense in the end. They even remembered to wrap up a tiny little storyline involving the girl's handbag, which doesn't really even matter, and I'd actually completely forgot about it. But it's that kind of attention to detail that makes this movie so good. And the people who made this, primarily Su Lun, I guess, the writer and director, obviously really cared about making this movie, and it shows. And the acting's really good too. The main guy in particular had to show some range, and he nailed it. And the woman isn't half bad either, and they worked very well together. Now the plot does follow a lot of classic tropes of romantic comedies, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's just part of the genre. But it doesn't strictly adhere to that template either. For the most part it does, but not completely. And I guess if we're being completely honest here, the characters at the core are a bit stereotypical. Like the woman is fixated on money and success, and the guy is a bit of a bumbling buffoon. And I feel like they could have probably done better. But it didn't really detract from the experience. In fact, they did a really good job of incorporating that into the actual story. It's a part of who they are, and part of their arcs. So that's not really an issue either. And overall, I really like this movie. A lot. Oh, and I guess it's worth mentioning that there's some post-credit stuff that you might want to stick around for, if you're gonna watch this. So would I recommend it? Absolutely. It's a great little movie. So check it out. Or don't. I'm not your ba. That's apparently Chinese for dad, if you're wondering.